For anyone who's really gotten into English literature, especially if you're prepping for those big exams like the NET, SET, or even the UPSC, you start to realize that there's this like small set of terms that keep popping up over and over again.
Yeah,
They're
definitely.
kind of like the essential vocabulary you absolutely need to really understand what's going on, at a deeper level.
Yeah, it's like the secret code to unlock the deeper meaning of all these great works.
Exactly. And that's really what we're going to be doing in this deep dive. We're
Yeah.
going to be diving deep into those terms, the top 10 terms, the terms that you just see over and over again in literary studies.
And we're going to give you like a shortcut to figuring out what matters most.
Right,
We're
exactly.
basing all of this on the work of Dr. Jasvant Rathod, who has really meticulously analyzed past exam papers and all of the most important, you know, books and educational resources for grad students in English literature.
Yeah, so whether you're just starting out in your studies or you're really in the thick of preparing for some big exam, this is going to be super valuable for you.
Oh, absolutely.
Because understanding these terms is not just about memorizing definitions, it's about truly being able to understand and discuss and excel in your literary pursuits.
Yeah, it's about being able to have that conversation,
Hmm.
like really engage with the material.
Absolutely. So consider this your must-have toolkit, your roadmap.
Yeah.
And our goal today is really to clearly define those top 10 terms, but also to understand why they're so important.
Yeah, why they're asked so often, right? Like what makes them so important
Yeah.
that they show up on these exams all the time.
Exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
So Dr. Rathod's analysis has pinpointed these top 10 most frequently asked terms, and
Mhm.
and they are metaphor, simile, alliteration, personification, imagery, irony, symbol, theme, plot, and setting.
Wow, that's a mouthful.
I know, right?
But it's such a great list because it really does cover the fundamentals, right?
Absolutely. These are the foundation.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's jump into it.
Okay, let's start with metaphor.
All right, metaphor. So in a nutshell, Dr. Rathod tells us a metaphor is when you say something is something else, like time is a thief, to suggest a similarity without using like or as.
Right, it's not a direct comparison, it's more like an implied one.
Yeah, and to kind of break it down even further, the detailed explanation says a metaphor is when you say one thing is another to show they are alike, like saying life is a journey.
Right, and it's not meant to be taken literally, right? Like life isn't actually a journey in a literal sense,
Yeah, exactly.
but it helps us see those deeper meanings.
Exactly, and Dr. Rathod points out that it's so frequently asked about in exams because it's essential for analyzing poetic language and really symbolism.
Yeah, because a good metaphor can pack so much meaning into just a few words.
Right, and when you think about how authors use these metaphors to create these really vivid images and evoke these really strong emotions.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And even to challenge the way that we typically see the world, you start to realize how powerful metaphors really are.
Yeah, they're not just decorative, you
Yeah,
know.
no, not at all.
They're really doing a lot of work in the text.
Exactly. And Dr. Rathod gives us a great example from Shakespeare's sonnets.
Oh, yeah?
He says that Shakespeare might say something like, "Love is a star."
Oh, I love that one.
It's so simple, yet so powerful.
Right. It's not that love is literally a star up in the sky, but it has some of those same qualities.
Exactly. And it makes you think about love in a whole new way.
Yeah, like maybe love is constant. Maybe it guides you. Maybe it's brilliant. There's all these different ways to interpret it.
Exactly. And for you listening, the reason that this is so important is that really understanding metaphor will unlock so much more meaning in the poetry that you're reading.
And not just poetry, all sorts of literature,
Well,
right?
yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so let's move on to simile.
Okay, simile. So Dr. Rathod says a simile compares two things using like or as, for example. Her eyes shone like stars.
Right, so it's a more direct comparison than a metaphor.
Exactly. It's very clearly saying these two things are similar.
And the detailed explanation gives us the example, he runs like a cheetah.
Another really clear example.
Yeah, and Dr. Rathod points out that it's actually easier to spot than a metaphor because of those words like or as.
Yeah, it's more straightforward.
Yeah, and that's probably why it's tested so often too. It's kind of a basic building block of descriptive language.
Right. It's fundamental, and
Yeah.
the why frequently asked section says it's common in poetry and prose, tested for comparison skills.
Right, so it's not just about identifying the simile. It's about understanding how the comparison works.
Exactly. And in the exam application section, Dr. Rathod mentions that you might see a question like, find the simile in this line.
Right, so you have to be able to pick it out from the text.
Exactly. But then also to understand what that simile is doing, how it's working.
Yeah, how it's contributing to the overall meaning.
And for you listening, recognizing similes will really help you understand how authors create these connections and paint these pictures for the reader, making the whole experience more vivid.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so next up is alliteration.
Oh, I love alliteration.
Me too. It's so fun to say.
Yeah, it's like a tongue twister.
Exactly. So Dr. Rathod says that alliteration is when words start with the same sound, like she sells seashells, creating a pleasing sonic effect.
Right, so it's all about that repetition of sounds, that musicality.
Yeah, and the detailed explanation gives us another classic example, Peter Piper picked.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
It's so memorable, right?
Yeah, because of the alliteration.
Exactly, and that's one of the reasons why it's asked about so much in exams, because it really contributes to that rhythm and that musicality of the language.
And Dr. Rathod points out that it often appears in poetry analysis for sound effects.
Right, so when you're analyzing a poem, you have to pay attention to those sound effects.
Yeah, because they can really enhance the meaning of the poem.
Exactly, and in the exam application section, Dr. Rathod gives us this example question. What is the effect of alliteration here?
So it's not just about being able to spot it, you have to be able to explain what it's doing.
Exactly, how it's contributing to the overall meaning and the feel of the poem.
And for our listeners, this means paying attention not just to what the words mean, but also how they sound.
Exactly, it's about that sonic experience.
Yeah, okay, let's move on to personification.
Okay, personification, this is a good one.
I love personification.
It's so creative.
Yeah, it's really fun.
So Dr. Rathod tells us that personification gives human qualities to non-human things. For instance, the wind howled in anger.
Right, so you're given something that's not human-like qualities.
Yeah, and the detailed explanation says personification means giving human traits to inanimate objects or abstract ideas, like the moon smiled. It's particularly common in nature poems.
Yeah, I can see that.
And Dr. Rathod mentions that it's frequently tested in imagery and figurative language questions.
Which makes sense because it's a really powerful way to create vivid imagery.
Right, it makes you see the world in a new way.
Yeah, and it helps us connect with things that aren't human on an emotional level.
Exactly, it's like you're giving them a personality.
Yeah.
So Dr. Rathod points out that an exam question might ask, how does personification create mood?
Right, so you have to think about how those human qualities affect the overall atmosphere of the piece.
Exactly. It's not just about identifying it, it's about understanding its effect.
And for those listening, recognizing personification can really help you see how authors bring these inanimate objects and abstract ideas to life.
Exactly, and how they create this really strong connection with the reader.
Yeah, it's a really powerful technique.
Okay, let's talk about imagery.
Imagery, so important.
Absolutely essential. So Dr. Rathod says, imagery uses words to create pictures in your mind, like describing a sunny beach to make you almost feel the warmth.
Yeah, it's all about engaging the senses, right?
Exactly, and the detailed explanation gives us another example. The red apple glowed.
It's like you can almost see that apple right in front of you.
It's so vivid, yeah, and Dr. Rathod points out that it's key for sensory analysis in texts, common in descriptive passages.
Right, because it's the primary way that authors make their writing come alive for the reader.
Exactly, and a good author will engage all of your senses, not just sight, but also sound, smell, taste, even touch.
It's about creating a full sensory experience.
Exactly, and Dr. Rathod mentions that exams often ask, identify the imagery and its effect.
Right, so again, it's not just about spotting it, it's about understanding what it's doing in the text.
Exactly. And for you listening, paying attention to imagery will make your whole reading experience so much richer and more engaging.
Yeah, because you're not just reading the words, you're experiencing them.
Exactly.
Okay, let's move on to irony.
Irony. All right, so Dr. Rathod says, irony is when something happens that's the opposite of what you expect, such as saying, what a beautiful day during a raging storm.
Yeah, classic irony right there.
It's all about that contrast between expectation and reality.
And the detailed explanation actually breaks irony down into 3 different types. Dramatic, situational, and verbal.
Right, so dramatic irony is when the audience knows something that the characters don't.
Like in a horror movie when you see the killer behind the door but the character doesn't.
Yeah, exactly.
And situational irony is when there's an unexpected twist to fate.
Like if a fire station burns down.
Yeah, exactly. It's ironic.
And then verbal irony is when you say the opposite of what you mean.
Like if you spill coffee all over yourself and say, oh, what a great start to my day.
Yeah, sarcasm is a really common form of verbal irony.
Right, and Dr. Rathod points out that irony is tested for understanding narrative twists and tone.
Yeah, because irony can be used to create humor, satire, it can expose hypocrisy, all sorts of things.
It really makes you think.
Exactly, and in the exam application section, Dr. Rathod mentions this question. Is this irony? Why?
So you have to be able to identify it and explain why it's ironic.
Exactly. What's the contrast between expectation and reality?
And for those listening, understanding irony will help you appreciate the nuances and complexities of an author's message.
It's a sign of sophisticated writing and reading.
Okay, next up is symbol.
Symbol. All right, so Dr. Rathod says a symbol is something tangible that stands for an abstract idea or something else, like a dove often representing peace.
Right, so it's something concrete that has a deeper meaning.
Yeah, and the detailed explanation says a symbol is something that stands for more than its literal meaning, like a rose frequently symbolizing love.
Yeah, so a rose isn't just a flower. It can also represent love, passion, beauty.
Exactly. And Dr. Rathod tells us that symbols are crucial for thematic analysis, often appearing in symbol-based questions.
Right, because symbols can give us clues about the author's deeper message.
Exactly. They're often carefully woven throughout the text to reinforce the central ideas.
Yeah, so you have to pay attention to those recurring images and objects.
Exactly. And Dr. Rathod mentions that you might see a question like, what does the symbol represent?
So you have to be able to interpret the symbol, figure out what it stands for.
And for you listening, understanding symbols is key to unlocking those deeper layers of meaning in literature.
It's about reading between the lines.
Okay, next we have theme.
Theme, the big one.
The heart of the story.
Yeah, so Dr. Rathod says, theme is the central idea or underlying message of a story. Something universal like love, loss, or the struggle for freedom.
It's what the story's really about.
And the details explanation says, theme is the main message or insight the author wants to convey, such as honesty is the best policy. It's what the story, at its core, is trying to teach us or explore.
It's the big takeaway.
Yeah, and Dr. Rathod tells us that it's central to essay questions on interpreting texts.
Which makes sense because understanding the theme is essential to understanding the whole point of the story.
Right, it's not just about what happens, it's about what it means.
And Dr. Rathod says that an exam question might ask, what is the theme of this poem?
So you have to be able to synthesize all the different elements of the text and figure out that central message.
Exactly. And for those listening, understanding theme will help you write those really insightful, really well-supported interpretations of literature.
It's a crucial skill.
Okay, let's move on to plot.
All right, plot. So Dr. Rathod says plot is the carefully constructed sequence of events that make up a story, typically with a beginning, a middle, and an end.
It's the skeleton of the story.
The backbone, yeah. And the detailed explanation says plot is the specific series of events in a story, much like the unfolding of a hero's journey. It typically has distinct parts: exposition, rising action, climax, falling action, and resolution. And exams might ask, describe the plot structure.
It's all about how the story unfolds.
And Dr. Rathod points out that it's fundamental for narrative analysis, frequently asked in questions about story structure.
Right, because understanding the plot helps you understand how the story's put together and why it works the way it does.
Exactly, and when you think about those different parts of the plot, the exposition, the rising action, the climax, the falling action, the resolution, you start to see how the author is building suspense, developing the characters, and conveying their message.
It's like a puzzle, all those pieces fitting together.
And for our listeners, understanding plot structure will give you a framework for understanding how stories are constructed.
And how they achieve their effects on the reader.
Okay, last but not least, we have setting.
All right, setting. So Dr. Rathod says, setting is the time and place in which a story unfolds. For example, a small village in rural England during the 19th century.
Right, the when and the where.
And the detailed explanation says, setting is where and when the story takes place, such as a dark and mysterious forest at night. It often plays a crucial role in establishing the mood and atmosphere.
Yeah, the setting can really set the tone for the whole story.
Absolutely. And Dr. Rathod tells us that setting is important for contextual analysis, often closely linked with questions about theme.
Because the setting can influence the characters, the plot, even the theme.
Exactly. It's not just a backdrop.
And Dr. Rathod gives us this example exam question. How does the setting affect the story?
So you have to think about that relationship between the environment and the characters and the events.
And for those listening, paying close attention to setting will really enrich your understanding of the whole story.
It adds so much depth.
Yeah, absolutely.
So there you have it, a deep dive into the top 10 most frequently asked literary terms, according to Dr. Rathod's analysis.
We've covered metaphor, simile, alliteration, personification, imagery, irony, symbol, theme, plot, and setting.
And we've talked about not just what they are, but why they're so important.
Exactly, because understanding these terms will give you a real advantage whether you're prepping for an exam or just trying to deepen your appreciation for literature.
Absolutely. It's like having a new set of lenses to view the world of literature.
Yeah.
So think about this. How might a really skilled author weave all of these different elements together to create a truly unforgettable story?
It's like they're using all these different tools to create a masterpiece.
Exactly. And for you listening, I really encourage you to go back to some of your favorite books and stories and see if you can spot these literary devices at work.
It's like a treasure hunt.
It really is, and it will make your reading experience so much richer.
I agree.
So keep exploring, keep learning, and most importantly, keep enjoying the wonderful world of literature.
Absolutely.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
Yeah, it's been fun.
Until next time.
See you later.